Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kutan.
And you're watching Consider This. Parti Bersatu Malaysia, or better known as Bersatu, will hold its inaugural party elections starting with the branch level beginning this month. Now, joining us to discuss this further, we have Associate Professor Dr. Hamidin Hamid, political analyst from University of Malaya, joining us on the show today. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So this is a relatively new party, right? 3.5 years old, and this is going to be the first time they're holding their party elections. What are you particularly interested in, given that this is the first time we're seeing this?
I think, Melissa, we put it in the context, Bersatu as one of the youngest party, but in power. I think that is something that we have to look at. Within that light, that I think why the first time election in Bersatu become very interesting for us to look at. As in fact, it is the first time they're going to have the elections, to almost 3 years old, but as I said just now, already in power. So all these elements, I think, make the elections very interesting to look at.
Can you help us sort of characterize the party? Some might say it's basically a split of UMNO, it's a faction of UMNO. Because UMNO members are in many other parties, including PKR, headed by former UMNO leaders, Anwar Ibrahim, no less. But is that the best way to describe Bersatu? I
think when we look at the beginning, Bersatu is very much a manifestation of what happened prior to the last general elections. Hopes of new things in Malaysian politics, especially among the Malays. I think that's what Bersatu promised. Have they achieved that so far? I think that's a big question mark for us to look, in my point of view. But it is very interesting. I'm looking from that angle. I'm not looking at it as a kind of splitter from the UMNO or others. I'm looking at something, there is a new ideas, new movement, even though by the same people within UMNO before, that giving a new hope about Malaysian politics, about Malay politics at that particular time. And how it will continue till today, I think is something that we can see what is happening.
And one of the ways of talking about Malaysian politics is, and renewal and a new start is one way of talking about it. But people often feel that individuals carry the culture, the political culture from the past, right? Whereas with Amanah, which is a splinter of PAS, PKR and DAP, they have a very different history, and they had 20 years to work through perhaps a new type of culture. Bersatu, the question is, does it come with a lot of UMNO DNA, or is it discarding it, in your view?
I think this is interesting. This is why I said in the beginning just now, Sharaad, is why I said the limelight of power must be kind of, we must really think about that when we analyze about Bersatu. As you said, Amanah, PKR, and others have that kind of history, molding the values, molding the structures of the party before where they are now. And Bersatu, within that short of time, suddenly the kind of the smell of power, is there. That's definitely changed the nature of the Bersatu. And this is where, for example, for some people who see it's just changing of shirt, for some of the individual, the action is still the same. This is, in my point of view, the first elections of Bersatu should create a good opportunity for them to lay out the foundations of the new values, of the new culture, of the new structure of Malay politics, of Malaysian politics that they want to instill for the future. I think that's the good time for them.
As a keen observer of Bersatu, what do you think are the values of this party? You talked about, the hope for Bersatu was to have new ideas in Malaysia Baru, right? And in the past 3.5 years that you've been watching Bersatu, what have you what conclusion have you come to in terms of what their values are?
I think looking at that, when analyzing what Bersatu can do, it's very difficult to pull them out of the context what is happening in the Malaysian politics generally. I think for me, I do expect Bersatu to carry out a new narrative. For example, about Malays, the position of the Malays, in my point of view. Nobody questioned about the agenda of Putra and others, but definitely people want to see new narrative out coming from last election of Malaysia Baru. So that's absence. That is still absence in my point of view. Definitely that's looking at strategically what's happening in the Malaysian politics today is a bit difficult to do that. But I think they should begin to see that, to make that the point that things are changing. as you said just now, new values. What is the new values that they want to do? With this, for example, 18 years old can vote. How are you going to attract the young one? What is the new structure that can appeal to these people? What is the new values that you want to insist? What type of leadership that you want to have? I think this is a new thing that Bersatu have to think differently.
And it's missing, right?
It's missing.
Okay, so you're expecting a discussion about that. Well, what about leadership? And, you know, when we think of the kind of figures within Bersatu, because Mahathir and Muhyiddin kind of dominate as the kind of the old guard, right? But what about the new leaders? I mean, there's the Syed Saddiq, and then there's also Ridwan, and so on. Do you see real challenges in terms of who's going to take control of this party and move it forward?
I think in any in Malaysian political traditions, always be a challenge, even though it's kind of certain that deputy will take over from the president. I think Bersatu is also facing that, especially we see the current leadership where Tun Mahathir, Tan Sri Muhyiddin and others, we know basically time is almost up for them.
Right.
And then the new one, but as you said just now, we don't see the new and upcomings is there to take over. Yes, Syed Saddiq, but does he's alone in terms of that? I think on that basic, in my point of view, is not that problem is not only faced by Bersatu. I think that's a very kind of general problem of Malaysian politics.
Yeah,
generally,
it's all the same faces and not enough
yeah.
young blood.
Yeah.
You know, and on that note, talking about Dr. Mahathir's leadership, Bersatu has decided that all its top posts, including that of the president, will be contested in these elections. So, you know, the presidency is up for grabs, so to speak. And in your mind, who is next in succession?
I think looking at it, I think, like it or not, in Malaysian politics, the way I see it, we are very much governed by traditions rather than rule of law and what's. I think that, in my point of view, looking at that now is obviously the most suitable candidate is Tan Sri Muhyiddin in term looking into. But for how long? He's almost early 70s now, in my point of view, which. This is where
he's young in comparison.
Yeah, definitely. But too old compared to the 18s. I think I'm looking from that. The way I see it is, we have to look from 5 years onward, and party politics have to look in terms of that. Imagine with the 18 years old votings, we had around what 5 million new voters.
Right.
And this is huge chunk, and we know that no political party can survive based on their members alone.
Yeah.
You have to appeal to the wider contact.
Definitely.
So this is where, as I said just now, where Bersatu can appeal. Yes, you can have Syed Saddiq, but that's what used to be in UMNO, have Khairi. But after that, even the crowd say that Amri is too old for us. KJ is too old for us. I think this is the problem. In 5 years, Syed Saddiq, even the younger said, no, you are too old for us.
Yeah, it has to be not personality driven, but rather value driven.
Indeed.
Now, so you said Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, do you expect that presidency post to be challenged?
I don't think so.
Okay,
looking at the current situation, I don't think so.
All right.
First, not only within the Bersatu, but it's also within the PH. I think that we give a very wrong signal to what's happened. I think Tun Mahathir is at the same time under pressure from certain group, for example, that ask him to give a deadline for transition of power and others. If challenge coming from Bersatu, I think that will not look good on him. I think they will sort it out.
To make sure that there's no kind of internal arguments.
I think for a couple of top posts, I think will be secured in that sense. Yeah.
Okay, let's continue this conversation in just a couple of minutes. We'll be back on Consider This. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris with Ms. Sharaad Kutan, and we're speaking tonight to Associate Professor Dr. Hamidin Hamid from University Malaya, talking about the Bersatu Party. Now, just before the break, you talked about how it's important for the party to show, have a show of unity, especially in this top post, because it will I guess, reflect better in its position in the coalition. And I'm just wondering, you mentioned factionalism before the break. We see that happening in other parties, particularly PKR. Is Bersatu also a victim to factionalism, as in all political parties, as an observer?
Yeah, I think as an observer, I think no party will manage to get away from that, especially in Malaysia. Why? When I discuss it, I like to see from bigger picture of Malaysian politics. First, we are strongly two elements that dominated that. One is client-patrons relationship. That is always there in any political party. That's kind of very much strong values, tradition within a relation. Second, dependency. I think these two. I think you can see that element in any party in Malaysia, and Bersatu also. I think will face that. The problem with the Bersatu is this. It's not the problem so much, it's challenge. As I said just now, first is young, second they are in power. So if they are in the opposition, I don't think the spotlight will be that strong on them. But now, because they are in power, furthermore, who's going to replace Mahathir in the bigger picture of Malaysian politics? And then, for example, today, I think 2 days ago, Mahathir mentioned that who are going to be the new education minister. He said that's post for Bersatu. That will give kind of another elements. Okay.
Right, so there'll be intense competition because it's not just for party positions, but also government positions.
I think that's why the challenge for the Bersatu, as I said, as 3 years old party and suddenly
in power.
It's not, for me, they're still struggling on the ground structurally, but at the same time holding power. I think that is something.
So it might have a distorting effect. I want to ask you whether this idea of allowing defectors, post the election, to come into the party and now also contest polls, this would be resented by those members who actually in many ways took a risk by leaving UMNO before the elections, now seeing those who stood by Najib Razak now being rewarded with both entry into the party but also the possibility of taking up posts. Will this, do you think, play out in the elections? Where do you see this happening?
It is. From our observations on what's happening on the ground, I think that's one of the biggest talking point, basically among the Bersatu, especially as you say, people who take the risk prior to the last election, and suddenly, as you said just now, the benefactor of the old party move in and go for that. I think this is big challenge for Bersatu, and this is where, in my opinion, what they must not only look from within the party. I think some of the problem faced by the political party in Malaysia, when they look very much from the angle of the party survival, they have to look, in my point of view, into wider context. How does the people, the voters, look of what's happening in Bersatu? In my point of view, if they allow and very much give a place for some of the defector to come in and holding senior posts after that, I think that will give not a very good light to the voters. Meaning, this is where, in my point of view, branding in politics suddenly play its role.
Mahathir is a shrewd operator. He must know the issue of the messaging that comes from this kind of strategy, but he also recognizes the need to build the party fast, right? The party, there is an urgency for the party to strengthen itself. And weakening UMNO must be part of its own strategy. So how do they have this balance? Is he achieving it?
I think this is from our looking at the experience, for example, when we analysed the PH government, not just only Bersatu, we said that one of the biggest mistakes of the PH government where they didn't really utilise the government agencies for the benefit of the government. What we're saying just now, it's not about the party, but about the policy, for example, meaning they are on their side, where agency must explain more about policy rather than about party. Even that is missing. And that, in my point of view, also face problem by the Bersatu. Look at the Tanjung Piai election, for example, in the last election in Tanjung Piai. I think the failure of that is where, while federal is by the PH, state is by the Bersatu, but you can see nothing move on the ground. Meaning the failure for them to take the advantage of being the rulers, being the party, dominant party, to have that benefit, I think is a very much still learning curve for them.
So why is that? We have already, Dr. Mahathir is not his first time in office, so he would know how to play the game.
I think, yes, definitely, Melisa, but when we look at the politics, it's not, I always say this, you can talk about policy, but at the end of the day, it's service delivery that matters on the ground. So you have to build this is where Bersatu challenge. You can have the national leaders, but who's the people on the ground that being accepted by the people? That is, UMNO strength, for example, even the weaknesses of leadership in the central leadership is there, but you can see on the ground they're still intact, because why? Leaderships on the ground does matter.
But also because the party is so small, they lack grassroots support and the party machinery, right? So rather than, and perhaps that's where the coalition comes in. Where do you think Bersatu, you know, in all reality, in all honesty, how is Bersatu's weight within this coalition, in your opinion?
I think currently they basically, in my point of view, riding on what's happened in the niche area of who's going to be leaders prior to the last election. They managed that.
They're still riding on that?
They're still riding on that to some extent. But I think the biggest challenge for them for the future is structurally, even I always emphasize on this, structurally, where are they in the PH? It's not only just on leadership, meaning they have to build a good structure, and that structure must include them. Even though how small they are, but the good structure of the PH must include them. So at least they have some good foundations that they belong to PH, rather than depend on the leadership, and as happening now.
I want to ask you this. I mean, there's been very little talk about you know, Mahathir moving out of the picture for Bersatu. They seem to emphasize the fact that the man's very energetic and that, you know, he seems to work harder than everybody else. But it seems behind that is a denial that the man is also, I mean, whether he's 94 or, you know, whatever his age is, that in some ways they have to think about succession. Are they really grappling with this? Do you think they can imagine a time when Dr. Mahathir is no longer there in the picture?
Yeah. When we talk to some friends in Bersatu and even in the party, I say this is the biggest challenge of Bersatu to some extent faced by PKR. For example, how you want to resist as PKR with Anwar Ibrahim, and so too with Mahathir in that sense. This is where I said just now, Sharaad, I believe this is a good opportunity for Bersatu to establish a new structure that can create a good pipeline of leadership that they can see, make it clear to the people who's next after Mahathir, who's next after the person that reflects Mahathir. So preparing that, I think that should be communicated early to the people. Yes, some definitely will resist, go to the nostalgic. Malaysia is very romantic in term of that. So, but I think that you're talking about future. You're talking that you need to get support of the future, not of the past. I think that is something that they really have to think about that.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back right here on Consider This. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Consider This. Melisa and Sharaad here with you tonight. We're talking about Bersatu and its future after to Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Joining us on the show, Associate Professor Dr. Hamid from University Malaya. Now, let's take a look at the challenges of the party, because earlier you said one of the biggest challenge was coming up with a new narrative to appeal to the younger voters, right? And Bersatu has really, I guess, not risen to the occasion in creating this new narrative. What are some of the other real challenges that this party will face going forward, do you think?
I think one of the biggest challenge is definitely leadership. I think I think it's not just within the Bersatu. I think within the PH government, who's next after Mahathir? I think that, and that's not only about Mahathir itself. It's about the structure of the party. For example, I think that is why I took, and when talking about that, it's not only Mahathir, as I said, are we going to have a new a set of leadership that's coming? And leadership is not only on the central. I think the problem with the Bersatu and looking at the structure of Malaysian politics is not only at the national level, but the state level, and also on the ground level. I think this is where I think Bersatu must prepare for that. This is what I mean by leadership. It's not only Mahathir. Yeah, in my point, I always say that president come and go, but on the ground that matters. So this is where, in my point of view, Bersatu must have a very clear and good choice of leaders that not only leads in the national but also on the ground. I think that what matters most.
So there's also this question of membership now. Now, you know, Bersatu, a potential Bersatu member could potentially go to AMANA.
Yeah.
He or she could go to PKR. They could go to DAP. If DAP tries to transform itself, Zaid Ibrahim recently taking up the post, you know, and there are young Malay people going into the DAP as well. So now you have a coalition where the parties are not distinct in that fashion anymore, right? Yeah. They don't have distinct membership bases. Yeah. They could potentially are in competition with each other.
Indeed.
So what is Bersatu going to, how is it going to show itself to be the choice of within the Pakatan Harapan, you know, array of parties?
What is the appeal, right? Why would someone join Bersatu?
Good point. This is where I want to take a different approach in regard to that. I always say that if the party politics in Malaysia think that membership is the one concern of them, I think they're making a mistake, especially in the current and the future. When we look at a trend in political affiliations among the young voters, almost zero, almost none.
Meaning young people don't want
they don't want to be affiliated with political party. They love to be independent, meaning their votings, their tendency is based on issues, okay, based on matters, and times does play. So in my point of view, this is where the party have to realign to that. Rather than so emphasize on membership, they have to take other things that matters to them when it comes to so-called membership or affiliation of the party. This is where, in my point of view, normally when we look cut across the world, two things that always, we like it or not, even in Malaysia, one is personality, and second is issues. And then now start coming out, we're doing survey, for example, we look at the values. What values that the youngs are looking actually? They want to be with certain parties. Freedom of expressions, for example, they want to see that how fluid the structure is within the party. So all that, in my point of view, Malaysian political party must think. I think we always say this when we analyze UMNO, for example, before always shouting that they have 3 over millions. But where are they in voting? Yeah. So it doesn't mean anything actually.
Right, so membership doesn't translate necessarily in support. Well, what about the pressure from outside the Pakatan then? You know, when Bersatu looks at Muafakat Nasional, do they feel now the pressure to ramp up their own identitarian politics and rhetoric at least? Do you think the Muafakat Nasional is going to play a role in shaping the message coming out from Bersatu, or Bersatu going to choose something else?
Good point, Sharaad. This is where I see just now, this is where what, for example, lacking into Bersatu, for example, to counter that narrative of Muafakat Nasional, this is where I say just now. I think they should take that opportunity, and not so much to counter, to have difference with Muafakat Nasional, but to give their own version of what's, for example, the Malay Muslims agenda for the future. I think they should use that opportunity to say, okay, we reject this, but what is ours? I think that is something, and for me, they have the advantage because they are in the ruling government and they have the partners, the APs, others who, in my point of view, definitely want to have that narrative, want to create new something that will give them a lot of way to maneuver to create that narrative.
But do you think the current leadership of Bersatu embodies those values, or wants to espouse those values? Even?
Yeah, I think yes, but I think looking at that, in my point of view, they try to project new things. But as I said just now, when we look at the bigger picture of Malaysian politics, this is the gamble that I have to look. For example, when can they really sell the ideas? I think definitely when they want to sell that during the heat of Muafakat Nasional, that would be a very much big clash. I do expect they will come with something. I do expect they will come with something when they have the right time to position PH. I think they will come with something kind of new narrative.
Congress Marah Melayu?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't
Congress
think so.
Marah was Bersatu. But never mind.
I think no, but I do expect they will have a very good, clear policy. I'm looking into that kind of deklarasi rakyat kind of approach where everybody agrees into that. That's what we're seeing. basically in Malaysian politics today. And then I believe Bersatu can play a big role in that.
Okay. Now, you know, in the last minute or so that we have, when we look at this contest that's upcoming, who should we look at? I mean, what are the more interesting competitions do you see happening, you know, and where could we look? Is it the youth wing or is it the women's wing? Where do you want us to look?
I still want to look at the youth wing.
Syed Saddiq.
And then, and especially I want to see the emergent new leadership. Not only leadership, but maybe in the vice presidents and others. Because I think, like it or not, in the past 20 months, when Bersatu put out the name as a cabinet and other people always said, do we have another choice? We like it or not, that is something. So I think this is a good opportunity for them that to give at least projection that we are different. We have the different sets of leaders, and I definitely want to see the young one to be there. Maybe not to take over yet, but at least is there in the second layers or third layers prepared to take over in the post-Mahathir period. Yeah.
Could I very quickly just ask you, do you think this is related at all to who's going to be next, perhaps in the education minister role?
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay. I think when Mahathir makes a statement that it is a Bersatu post, normally will goes to senior leadership,
sure.
vice presidents and other. I think definitely that's hit up. Actually, we're talking to a friend. I think when Mahathir do that, I think that will make a lot of them start asking how much money they have in the pocket. I think basically that's basically how to fund the campaign in term of that. But I think it is definitely will have some meaning.
All right.
in the elections. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been a wonderful discussion about the future of Parti Bersatu. That's all the time we have on Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris with me, Sharaad Kutan, signing off for tonight. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Thank you for watching and good night.